I remember a couple of years ago, sometimes I would have like an email to write, and that would take me hours. I would wake up in the morning and I'd be dreading it. I'd be like, oh, I have to write that email. Like, I'll be thinking about it all day. I'll write like 7 drafts. I'll have my wife look at it. Like, does this look right? Now I can get that done in like 10 minutes. Like, like, hey, write this email. Here's my bullet points of things I want to say. I don't want to sound like this. Here's some instructions. And sometimes my instructions are like 10 times longer than the email itself, but those instructions will get that email perfect.
Hello and welcome to Working to Work, a neurodivergent journey through employment. I'm Sam, the host of this project, and welcome to you if you're listening on Resonance 104.4 FM, if you're listening on the podcast feed, or if you're watching on YouTube. This project explores the intersection of neurodivergence and employment, and in this season 2, I'm in particular looking at neurodivergent creatives and their journey obtaining and maintaining work, and what challenges exist and how they might be mitigated. In today's episode, I'm joined by Justin Borge, who is a digital marketer and a ChatGPT enthusiast. And it's the latter that I'm going to be speaking to Justin primarily about, because in this episode, I wanted to explore how AI tools like ChatGPT can potentially support neurodivergent creatives in terms of realizing their ideas, getting help with structuring their work, getting context, different avenues. I think ChatGPT might be useful as a support tool in lieu of or in combination with human support. And I wanted to speak with Justin in particular because, as I say, Justin is a ChatGPT enthusiast, but also someone that is ADHD. So Justin uses ChatGPT to enhance his strengths in ideation and creative thinking, but also bridge gaps where he maybe struggles more, such as in organization or memory, follow through in some instances. So we'll be exploring in this episode how ChatGPT, when used thoughtfully, can become a supportive tool for neurodivergent people to utilize in order to obtain and maintain work, rather than something to fear that's going to be put even more pressure on their potential for them to find work. So in this episode, we're going to touch on how Justin first started using ChatGPT and how it evolved from a sort of novelty into an essential tool in his life. We'll discuss the ways in which AI can be utilized as a sort of non-judgmental support tool that's available anytime. Justin will speak to how he's able to take information, complex information that perhaps he doesn't understand, but utilize ChatGPT to convert it into a format that does make sense to him. And we touch briefly on the ethical uses of ChatGPT and other AI like it, and how not to lose one's voice while using this type of technology. So without further ado, here is my discussion with Justin Borge. Actually, a little further ado, please do subscribe and follow the project, because that kind of interaction is what helps grow the audience. And the more people I feel that hear these conversations, the better and the more impactful they can be. So thank you if you have already, and please do if you see fit. Now, my interview with Justin. Justin, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to have this conversation about ChatGPT and AI and how it can benefit neurodivergent people. I've wanted to do it for a long time. So yeah, thank you again. Can you introduce yourself and what you've done and what you want to do?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thank you very much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. This is really cool. I told my therapist about your project, and he was really excited about it. So I thought you'd appreciate that. Yeah, my name is Justin Borge. I am technically a freelance marketing consultant, but that's not exactly 100% what I want to talk about today. I use ChatGPT for, yes, that, my personal life, my work life, my professional life, but kind of everything. I don't know. I don't like the term power user, but I know in the grand scheme of things, I probably am. It's helped me a lot as an ADHD person, and if I could share how I use it to help other ADHD folks, I'd love to.
What got you interested initially? Just to give a bit of context, I was first introduced to it by a coach who mentioned it as this could be an amazing tool to support neurodivergent people. So I'm curious, like, what your first interactions was and what compelled you to look into it more.
I have ADHD, and as an ADHD person, I 100% agree. It's a huge tool to help. That wasn't my interest, my initial foray. I just like computers. I like tech. I think it's fun to mess around with this kind of stuff. And I remember, I think a year and a half ago, whenever it first came out, I was just like, oh, make fart jokes. Like, can you please do something silly with this? And I was having fun with it. And that quickly became like, oh, I can do more with this. I tried using it for writing emails. I tried using it for helping me prepare for an important conversation. I tried using it for getting my news. I tried using it for, honestly, and in hindsight, I wasn't actively doing this because of my ADHD. I wasn't thinking of it that way, but I'm sure like my ADHD brain was benefiting from this and I was using it that way. Sometimes I would have a hard time reading a long passage of text, for example. I would paste all that into ChatGPT and talk with it. Like, what are they trying to say here? Like, do they mean this? This is a little confusing. This line, I'm getting hung up on this thing. Can you simplify it? And it'd be like, sure, here's how you simplify it. And if I still didn't get it, I can be like, I'm still not getting it. Can you give me another example? And I was definitely using it like a tool that would benefit, I guess, my ADHD issues.
Yeah, you just reminded me that in a group chat that we have, you'd mentioned when you want something explained or want to understand something, you've asked ChatGPT to explain it as if it were a baseball team, because baseball is something that you're very knowledgeable about. And I think that's a fascinating way that ChatGPT can be used, that it can create a kind of analogy. Can you explain kind of how that works, or an example of how that would work? What you would try and get kind of demystified via something you are familiar with?
Absolutely. So as you just said, I'm a baseball fan. I have always been a baseball fan since I was 5 years old. I'm 37 now. So like this is a subject I know well. And I remember one specific instance. I was asking ChatGPT to break down business networking in baseball terms. And it did an amazing job. It was like, cool. Imagine you're the owner of a baseball franchise and you're looking for, to make sure your team succeeds. You need a manager, you need, a team, you need people in the front office, and you need players. Now, imagine like you're at a business networking event and this, and it drew all these conclusions or all these comparisons, to make it relate to a way that I understood. Like, I don't expect all of your listeners to be baseball fans, but you could, apply that to something that you do know a lot about. And it's like, hey, connect those dots. And it really put it in my head. It's like, oh, dang, like at this business networking event, I need to pretend I'm a general manager of a baseball club. And what I'm doing here is I'm looking for someone who could run my front office. And this person might be a good role player on my team. Oh, he's a bench player, but I should definitely talk to him. And it puts it in perspective in a way that helps me frame that. And I think one underrated aspect of AI and ChatGPT is like, I'm not worried about bothering it. Like, I'm not worried about just being like, hey, explain this 100 times to me. I'm not wasting someone's time for an hour. I'm using my own time to learn something in a way that helps me learn. Like, it's a resource that if I was talking to another human ad nauseum about making this comparison to baseball, they might get bored. Like they might get annoyed. Like I would feel guilty I'm wasting their time. This is my tool, and I'm using it that way.
Yeah, I 100% agree in terms of it's kind of omnipresence and that you can engage with it at any time. And I've utilized it more and more since it's come out, and to the point where it helps with producing some of these episodes. And I think of it sometimes as a support worker that is always there and is always willing and can absorb you when you're frustrated, when you're excited, when you're happy. And that's really beneficial to know that actually for challenging tasks, if there isn't a human, if you don't have the money to pay necessary for a coach or some type of support, or you don't have the network to offer you that support, that there is something there that can help you. In terms of the baseball analogy, how did you think about that? Because some of the interesting thing for me in terms of your passion and enthusiasm for ChatGPT is you come to this group chat with these really quite novel uses for it that I wouldn't necessarily think of to use ChatGPT for, and AI in general. And I think that's something that why maybe this kind of support isn't adopted as much by the general public as presumably some of the producers of it would hope, because they're not sure of the applications or how it can help them. And some of them seem quite base. You kind of need to think around, well, maybe it could do this for me.
I think this is something that ADHD people like myself are good at naturally. This is a skill I have because of my ADHD. Like, I'm good at ideas. I have tons of ideas, Sam. I have so many ideas coming a million miles a minute. The hard part's always practical, like putting it, making it come to real life, come to fruition, seeing it through, making a plan, organizing those thoughts. And this is a great tool for me. Like, I'll be out walking my dog and I'll have this crazy idea. I open my phone. Sometimes I even talk to ChatGPT. I'll be like, hey, add this, to my things to think about later. So yeah, I use it for organizing my thoughts. I use it for remembering things I've already thought. So one of the paid ChatGPT features I use a ton of is called projects. So on the left sidebar, you can create a project, which is essentially a folder. And on that, I label it. This is everything I'm doing about X subject. I have one for learning Portuguese, which is something I'm doing. I have one for my work, which is freelance marketing. I have one for a passion project I'm working on. And basically I can organize my thoughts in those things. For example, in my freelance marketing one, I have a chat that is every conversation I've ever had with this prospective and now client. I redact important information. I make sure. So what I first do is I go to Google Docs and I copy and paste our chats directly into that Google Doc, our emails and chats between me and the client. And I will change their name. I will actually put like parentheses redacted on their name, on their thing, just on their anything, potentially identifiable, just because I don't know, I'm scared of that kind of information being out, I guess, or being seen as unprofessional or careless with their data. So I redact that kind of stuff. But I upload literally like a one doc of every conversation or everything we've ever talked about. And I'll upload that as a PDF to my file. And it's called like this project. And that way, when I want to talk to that person again, if I have a client call with them, I'll be like, hey, ChatGPT, what did we talk about last time? Like, what, 6 months ago, what were they working on? What are we working on now? How can I come prepared to this meeting today? And it gives me some really novel, insightful ideas. It's not always perfect, but it's really good for remembering stuff, for recalling information, for preparing for, tedious tasks that would otherwise be difficult for me.
So how would you engage with ChatGPT? So you've got the document in there and then you write to ChatGPT and say, there's a document there. I want you to tell me what we've talked about in the past and what we said we'd talk about the next time we meet. And it can take that information and synthesize it.
That's a great way to start with it. You can also say, hey, you can confide in ChatGPT. You can say, hey, I'm spitballing this idea to propose to Sam. I think this is a good idea, but he might have concerns with the price, of my proposal, or how can I overcome this objection that I'm foreseeing? Like I'm trying to sell him on a package for a website because I build websites. And a common concern that people like Sam say is X. How can I overcome that? And then ChatGPT will be like, well, you should XYZ this, respond this way. And so, yes, it'll catch you up, but B, it can give me a good brainstorming tool. Like, here's how I can do a better job in my current task.
In those situations, when you engage ChatGPT in that way, do you generally feel like you have an inherent idea of how you would approach it, but want kind of a second opinion from ChatGPT? Or is it that you feel actually this is an area where I'm not sure how to approach it, and ChatGPT supports you there?
Both. Both. Like really, like it's crazy because I do this so frequently, it's like second nature to me. Like it sounds weird. I'm like so connected to this stuff. But for me, sometimes I'll have a chat where it's, hey, I have this idea and I want some help processing it. And then I have other chats, and sometimes these are my best, like some of my best ideas come from, where I guess it's our ideas. But some of like my best ideas come from is like, I'm having this frustration. Is there any way you can think of that could solve that problem? So one baseball related thing I'm working on as a passion side project is a Python script. It's a quote unquote algorithm. I don't know if that's the correct term, but it's an algorithm.
Python, just for listeners, Python is a coding language.
So I'll simplify it. I'm working on an algorithm right now that takes baseball players' underlying statistics and makes predictions about how they will perform in the future. Where did I get that idea? I was playing fantasy baseball with my friends. This is something that interests me. And I went into ChatGPT and I was like, hey, can you think of any ways to predict a player's future performance? And it was like, oh, you could create an algorithm. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I should create an algorithm. And I was like, what's the first step in creating an algorithm? And then it says, you should do this. And it's like, okay, great. Now make me a list of every step it takes to build an algorithm. And then now you have a list of the 20 things it takes. And okay, cool, I'll start with number one. Let's do number one together. And I'm not a coder, but I'm building an algorithm. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's in the way you describe it there, it's has the potential to be a really democratizing tool and also a demystifying tool. So it could democratize the opportunity or the ability to do certain things, and then demystifying basically like how to do it and to support you in developing those skills and to realize it.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts the amount of like coding work that I'm working on, and I'm not a coder. Your listeners should know this. Like I like computers, but I've never coded. Like I've never taken a coding course before. Like I'm proper not. But if you looked at my computer, you would not believe that. I have a bunch of Python scripts and I have a bunch of really like intense looking code that I am working with. But all of that is just like, hey, ChatGPT, look at this code. I'm trying to solve X problem with it. Can you see anything wrong with it? And you're like, oh yeah, cool. On line 755, there's this problem. And I'm like, cool, can you fix it? And it fixes it. And now I have a code that's working. And it's like, whoa, I'm a coder now.
Sometimes you hear about schools and universities like being wary of their students using ChatGPT to write essays, and it's seen as a kind of a cheat code somehow. How do you think about kind of utilizing its abilities in your work, and whether this is your work or it's actually you're kind of offloading it to someone else, or to something else?
I guess I can see that. I can see an argument that like, you didn't deserve it. You didn't go to coding school. You're like, you can't write an algorithm. Like, I guess I get that. But I like your word of democratizing it earlier. It's like, I have ADHD. Like, school is really hard for me. I was really bad at school. That doesn't mean like I don't deserve to come up with projects. So for me, like I see it as like having a big help finally. I see it as like I've got a resource, a tool that like makes it possible for me to do the amazing things that I dream of.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm with you. I perceive it in a similar way in terms of the way that you're using it. Just wanted to kind of offer that as a thought. And even like, it's not for me to speak to your school experience, but like, I wonder if you have lots of capabilities, but what school wanted you to do and work in a certain way weren't necessarily aligned with your strengths, and more aligned with your challenges, or kind of areas that you needed a bit more support in. If school were flipped and it was about creating ideas and there were kind of more support to help realize them or to read certain things, then you probably would have excelled. I think school and excelling there like is more about, to a certain extent, obviously one's endeavor and hard work, but also how your mind operates and what the curriculum is.
Yeah, I remember distinctly having this like frustration where like I know I'm not stupid, but I'm not fitting in with this model. Like they're like, go home, read this book, write this essay, let's do this thing. And I was like, I can't. like I can't do that. Like I will read 3 lines of this book, my mind will wander, I will forget what I read. I will feel like I'm never going to make it in the world because, that's what they said I was supposed to do. And it's like, suddenly it's like, oh, you know what? You have ADHD. That's why reading is hard. And now suddenly, like, I can go to ChatGPT and like, hey, this book, like the subject matter interests me, but I struggle with reading it. Can you break it down into some key points for me? Like, and it's like, cool, here's the key points of that book. I'm like, great, that's interesting. And I can actually engage with that. And I can say, that's fascinating. Does it say anywhere this? Does it say anywhere about that? That spurns an idea. And I can just have a chat with it because that's a way that I learn. I learn by talking. I learn by processing. This is how I learn.
Yeah, it's really relatable, your school experience, to my own. In assignments in school, when you're asked, okay, here's read this text and synthesize what it's about. Like, I'm thinking, if we had ChatGPT, well, obviously then that would help us do it, but it would kind of do it for us, and it wouldn't necessarily like help us develop that kind of critical faculties to be able to take in information and speak to what it's about.
I guess I'm following your train of thought here, but maybe like that's how schools need to change. Like, 100 years ago, they were presumably they weren't teaching how people used, computers. They didn't have typing classes in the 50s and 60s. Maybe they did. Maybe that's too early. Maybe they didn't have typing classes in the 30s.
I was just going to say, maybe we don't all need to synthesize texts. Maybe, like, for example, like maths was a struggle for me, and some of those reading assignments and just doing homework and being focused and getting it done. But I think many of those things I don't necessarily need to utilize in my working life because I don't see them as strengths and thus haven't sought work that relates to them. I did poorly in school, but then went to university and did a degree that I was passionate about and did really well. I think it's unfortunate sometimes that neurodivergent people are framed as having these kind of deficiencies, where it's more like that the system isn't set up to kind of highlight the strengths.
I definitely struggled in stuff I didn't see a point in. I'd be like, why am I doing this? Like, I don't care. I'm going to do something else.
Thinking about ChatGPT and AI in general, there's a fear, I think, of artificial intelligence taking people's jobs, but also a kind of, I don't know, maybe just like a fear of change. Why are you not scared of it in the same way?
I suppose I'm scared of that too. Deep down, I have these same concerns as anybody. I guess one could get to the ethical argument of like, why are you using something that you're scared of? I think for me, I justify this as A, I'm interested. B, it helps me. Helps me a lot. Like, it helps me a lot. So, the pros outweigh the cons to me. I've also heard terms like, or I've heard sayings like, AI is not taking your job. A human using AI is. So that sticks out to me. It's like, I want to be the human using AI. Like, I want to keep myself employable. I want to know how to use the tools. I don't want to just put my fingers in my ears and hope that the world isn't going to change, or and we can go back to 10 years ago. Like, I don't see that as happening. And so I kind of see it as keeping myself employable. I see it as keeping up with, the changing tides.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a bit of a theory in terms of AI and why potentially it's less of a, in inverted commas, threat to neurodivergent people. And it kind of aligns with a bit of how you've been speaking about its uses for you, because I think a lot of time, and I don't want to generalize too much, because there's neurodivergent people that can plan and be incredibly organized. But in terms of people that are ADHD, I think that can be a challenge, and it can be hard to stay focused and plan out exactly what we're doing. And we need to see it in steps. But we do have the ideas, and the ideas, I think, are the real value, because there's actually a lot of more people, I think, that can do that structured planning. So in some ways, I think ChatGPT and others like it, it's a kind of neurotypical brain that we can sometimes lean on. We've got the ideas and the kind of out of the box thinking, and then we can ask, okay, I need support to do the bits that aren't. And whereas ChatGPT, I don't think is as good at thinking outside the box and coming up with like wildly creative ideas, because it's still sourcing everything from this like general pool of common knowledge that is formed primarily of neurotypical minds.
I love that. That's a really insightful perspective. Have you ever asked an AI to do something creative for you? It doesn't do a good job. Like I copyright sometimes, and I'll be like, ChatGPT, give me a good hero header for this website, and it's like, no, that's pretty bad actually. Like it's like, I do think that the human mind, at least for now, is still more creative in all these ways, but you're right. Like the non-creative ways, like what's step one, what's step two, I need a project manager. And it's kind of like I always have a project manager and someone I can vent to and someone I could, just lean on. I see this kind of just like always having help all of a sudden.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this season of Working to Work is primarily about neurodivergent creatives. And while we're saying in this, it might sound counterintuitive that AI isn't creative, I think what it can do is support neurodivergent creatives to realize the things that they are trying to achieve by helping in those areas that we're not as strong in. And I think also to provide context, to be able to easily ask and to understand things that we maybe don't have the knowledge of, I think is an incredibly valuable resource.
One thing that I've been doing with the ChatGPT that you might find interesting, or your listeners might find interesting, is I'm not sure it's a Justin thing or an ADHD thing, but I am not very good at watching YouTube videos. That doesn't mean I'm not interested in YouTube videos. There's a lot of valuable information on YouTube. But for me to sit down and watch a 20, 30-minute video, it's like pulling teeth. I can't do it. Like it's the same as reading a book for me. Like I really struggle with that. What I can do is I can copy that link to the YouTube video, paste it into this thing on ChatGPT, this plugin, and that it automatically reads the transcript from the YouTube video. And I can be like, it's almost as if I watched it. So I'll be like, instantly, dear ChatGPT, what's this video about? The title is X, what are the main things they talk about? And it'll summarize that video for me. And then I can have a conversation with ChatGPT about the video. And so I feel like I'm learning, and I can say, hey, do they mention anywhere in this video this subject? If so, what timestamp? Then I can go watch that little bit. Or I can say, hey, they said this one line, that's a little confusing to me. Like, let's have a side chat. Like, is that comparable to this in baseball? And like, it's like my therapist oftentimes gives me YouTube videos to watch for homework. And this is how I get through them. Like I will watch the YouTube video on, I don't know, a tough relationship or a tough conversation with someone you have a relationship with. And it's an hour-long video. I don't think I would ever get through that on my own. But I'll come to therapy prepared, and I'll tell him I watched. I lie, but I'll tell him I watched the video. But and we really can't talk about it. I feel as if I ingested the information.
There's a lot of trust involved in that, in what you're doing, in the sense that you're trusting that it is accurately synthesizing or summarizing what is in that video. And there's been notable instances. I can think of when Google rolled out Gemini and it was spitting out some kind of images, I think, that were a bit questionable.
I definitely remember seeing those headlines.
The German army of the 1930s that was of diverse group as an example. I mean, that's an extreme example, but and maybe it's like, a video that your therapist gives you, if your interpretation that you get from AI isn't accurate, well, they could just say, oh, that's not really what it's about. The stakes are quite low. But how do you kind of feel in terms of like you're putting a lot of trust if you don't watch it as well to basically check their homework that it's working?
So one thing you can do at least on the, cause I am a $20 a month paying subscriber, at least on I'm not sure about the free plan, but at least on the paying plan, you can highlight a line in there and you can say, hey, can you get a fact check on this? And find me a link to read that proves this true, or find me a link that proves this false. And then I can open up a link and I can do my own little research. And I find that very valuable. I do it all the time. I do that a lot, especially when I'm doing work, like for important work for clients, et cetera. Like I don't want to give them wrong information because I leaned on AI. I don't want to, that would make me look bad.
Yeah, and as I was saying that, I was just thinking, well, there's no guarantee that what's in the video is true, that the person that made that video is complete, or that the website that is being cited or that article that it's referencing is accurate. So probably of anyone, the computer's not going to lie to you. But I guess it's not about lying, but kind of getting it wrong or misinterpreting what's being said there. Because regardless of whether the article or the video is inaccurate or false or has falsities in it.
Yeah, it's not like the article that you found on Google is going to be not biased, and then the person who wrote it on their blog is going to be totally factual either. Like we're all kind of putting some trust in what we're reading is true. I think you could go down a rabbit hole and spend an hour citing sources, getting back to the original study, et cetera, which, I've done that. And like sometimes it's you do that when you Google too.
We touched a bit on things not working, but have there been instances where you felt like what I wanted to get out of it hasn't worked and kind of there's a limitation there?
Well, the first obvious thing is image creation. I mean, getting people with 7 fingers is always pretty crazy. Aside from that, I don't do a lot of image creation in my, in my uses. But I was doing some website work and some content writing work. I was writing. So I remember when I first used it, my very first time giving something to a client, I was like, hey, look at this article. I wrote in quotes. I did, give a lot of attention to it. I didn't just give it in a ChatGPT and spit it out in 30 seconds. Like it still took me a couple hours, but I remember that client's feedback was like, oh, you used this one word 15 times. They're like, oh, I don't remember what the word was, but I remember like doing like a command F, and they're like, he's right. Like I didn't even notice that. Like, and so like that is something I've become extremely like. It was embarrassing. Like I felt bad. I probably looked bad. But
do you think they clocked that was because of that you utilized this technology, or because I bet they just thought you overused the word?
I bet they did. They never said anything. They didn't want to. They didn't want to ruffle. They didn't want to be rude or anything. But they're smart people. I'm sure they figured that out. Yeah, I mean, I fixed it. I was responsible for the delivery being good, and then they've since published that article, and everything's fine. But yeah, that was like an eye opener that like, oh, I need to be really careful about this kind of thing. If I'm publishing stuff on the internet, I need to be sure that the words are not repeated.
Yeah, and there's 2 ways to approach that, right? The old school way would be I need to proofread what's coming out of this more thoroughly, and the other would potentially is to talk to ChatGPT and say, hey, I don't want you to use this word repetitively. I want you to limit this and to use other alternatives. Which one did you do?
The latter, of course. I now have a prompt. So I have a text expander on my computer where it's, it's like a short code thing. You type in a key phrase. I know you know this, but this is for you.
I have this for my email address because it's super long and like all of my names. So if I type in SSR, it populates my whole name at gmail.com.
So I have one of those, but for a ChatGPT prompt on writing accurately or writing convincingly, like me. So I type in my little code, and what it spits out is like a paragraph that says, ChatGPT, here are your instructions on writing accurately. Don't use any word more than twice. Don't use this. Don't do that. Here's how I like to format things. I like to use semicolons. I like to use bullet points. I like to use H2 headers, et cetera, et cetera. And like I have personally given it those instructions because this is how I like to write, and I want my writing to be followed. And then at the end, I'll just paste that in, and then ChatGPT will then be like, here's your article, and it sounds like you. And like, cool. Yeah.
One thing that I think I feel ChatGPT and AI could be much more useful for me if I put in the work that you've done to set it up and to understand how it works. And one thing that slightly surprises me, given what you said about kind of not patience, but it challenging in kind of like reading through how something works or watching a video, that you've got to that point where you've set everything up so it can be so efficient and work so well for you. So how did you approach learning it and setting everything up and having the patience and to do that?
I think my motivation was just getting frustrated and having to have these same conversations over and over again. When I was working on that fantasy baseball algorithm, I'm still working on it, but in the beginning, when I was really, really like in the weeds with it kept making the same mistakes, and I kept having to say the same sentence: "Do this, don't do that. Why did you do this? You're not listening to me. I hate you." And I would get so angry. Like I remember one time getting mad at it, like, "You suck." Like I typed that in, like, and I got like so frustrated with it making the same mistakes and me having to repeat myself that I think I started thinking of systems. Like, how can I prevent this from happening again? What kind of text expander option can I use so I don't have to type the same thing in every time? How can my prompts get better? Like, because I guess this is me. I believe that with the correct prompt, basically anything is achievable with these computers. You're talking to a computer, like this thing is designed to behave in a certain way. And you have to kind of reverse engineer it. What is it looking for? What does it need for me to get what I want? And then okay, well, it probably needs this.
Yeah, and you're much more well-versed with using it than I am, but like I recognize that when I do, that it is a skill. It's something to learn, to understand like how to frame what you're asking it to do in the way that's going to help you in the most efficient, accurate way. And it, just like it's like learning a language to an extent. You can use natural language, but it works best, I find. I think going forward, it will be seen as a skill and to be able to work with AI, familiarity working with these technologies, because it's like a language of sorts, even if you can use natural language.
This is kind of crazy, and maybe it is crazy. Like maybe this is just me banging on about something, but you were talking about democratizing this kind of stuff earlier, and this being the great equalizer. I suddenly feel confident I could do a lot of jobs, like jobs I'm not otherwise qualified for. Like I'm not qualified to be a coder, but I feel if you look at my portfolio now, I have a bunch of cool coding projects, and like they're really well executed. I think like I have impressed my developer friends who do this for a living. Like I have set up really highly technical stuff, and I'm like, I probably could do this. Someone could probably pay me. I don't think I'd be a good doctor. I don't think with things like with this kind of like, people's lives are at stake kind of information stuff, but anything like even stuff I'm otherwise not qualified for, I feel like I could look at jobs, like a job board on the internet, and it's like something that in years past, I'd be like, oh, I can never do this. Now suddenly it's like, hey, ChatGPT, look at this job posting. What are the skills I would need? What am I missing? Like, could I learn this pretty quickly? Like, all right, now how do I learn that? What's the quickest way I can get there? And I feel is like, I could probably do that. Like, it's like this great equalizer.
I recently rewatched The Matrix, and the way you're describing it reminds you of The Matrix, when it's just like they put in the simulation program and like, oh, I know how to do Kung Fu. I don't think ChatGPT is there yet. You still need to kind of put in some work, and it doesn't feel as fun. But I guess that's an interesting question. Do you enjoy interacting with it? Does it feel fun, or does it feel like work?
Yeah, no, it feels like super fun. Like Here's a Justin thing though. I like computers. I always have. Like I'm interested in this stuff. It also like for me, it's like I'm getting so much more output nowadays. My productivity, like I'm getting more done in less time. Like, here's my things I have to get done today. I have to write this. I remember a couple of years ago, sometimes I would have like an email to write, and that would take me hours. Like I would wake up in the morning and I'd be dreading it. I'd be like, oh, I have to write that email. Like I'll be thinking about it all day. I'll write like 7 drafts. I'll have my wife look at it. Like, does this look right? Now I can get that done in like 10 minutes. Like, like, hey, write this email. Here's my bullet points of things I want to say. I don't want to sound like this. Here's some instructions. And sometimes my instructions are like 10 times longer than the email itself, but those instructions will get that email perfect. And it's like, I want to write a short email. I want to cover this subject. I don't want to sound like this. I do want to sound smart. I don't want to sound condescending. I want this and that. And, 10 minutes later, I got boom, the perfect email. And that no longer takes me 6 hours. And it's like, cool, that took 10 minutes.
I totally relate to that. I'm wondering, like, what do you think the root of that struggle to create that email without ChatGPT?
God, this has to be an ADHD thing because, I get overloaded and frustrated and, I overthink things and I'm confident I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one, but there is a lot of ADHD folks out there where, yeah, I have all these ideas. I want to get it perfect. I want to do a good job. I want to present myself as a smart, capable, professional person, but I also like don't want to present myself as like arrogant or condescending or et cetera, et cetera. So in my head, it's worth it to spend the time getting right. And that's why I get overwhelmed. Like I want to do a damn good job.
Do you think it can be hard to identify for you what the fundamentally key things that person needs to know are, when there's like a lot of things potentially you want to say? Is editing a challenge there?
Yeah. So remember that thing I said earlier about having a PDF upload of everything you've ever had this conversation with that person? This would come extremely in handy there because when you write that email, it already has that context of everything you've discussed before. So then you could say to ChatGPT, hey, look, I think they need to know this thing. Is there any indication in the past emails that they already know this? And ChatGPT will be like, yeah, actually, on email 2 on January 24th, they wrote this line. I'm like, cool, I don't need to repeat that. Or I can write everything I want to write, which will be 1,000 words. And then I'll be like, ChatGPT, reduce this to 100. And make sure all the messages get across. Be very extremely succinct with your words. Be sure all of this is polite. They seem valued, and etc. And it'll do that. And you're like, that was so useful. I just like brain dumped every thought I had, which was not well written. It was not succinct. And then I was like,
and doesn't need to be written either. You can speak it.
You can speak it.
Like
yeah.
I've been loving that I don't actually have to sit there and write it, or I can kind of like record it as like a voice message to someone effectively, and then it can use that text.
And then you're like, cool. Take every word I just said. I just gave you 1,000 words. Break it into a really concise, short, sweet email that they'll be happy to receive.
Do you think there are any risks or downsides to using AI for people with ADHD that are ADHD?
God, if they took it away from me, I'd be really bummed. Like I've gotten really accustomed to using it, and ChatGPT does go down sometimes. So I'll be like, oh, I have this project to do. Oh, it's down. What do I do? My brain doesn't know how to think anymore. That's a little concerning. Like, if they or the company ever went out of business, or I don't know, some catastrophe happened that made it, unable to use it. It's like, yeah, I was really accustomed to being ultra productive, and I was really accustomed to this new way of thinking and working. And now I have to go back to the Stone Ages. Like that would suck. So maybe there's the downside there, but I don't think that's just for neurodivergent people.
And I wonder if actually seeing what ChatGPT does, like I like the idea that, okay, I've put all this stuff in, it's helped summarize it for me, but sometimes you can ask it to explain why you chose to omit this stuff and include this stuff. And I can kind of learn, that maybe I could, if ChatGPT were down, maybe I can recall some of like the what I learned from how it approaches editing something to apply myself. Like it's not completely passive, and that you're not being able to see or able to ask, how did you do that? You know, it's like in school when they want to see the workings, like you can ask ChatGPT to show you its workings so that you can learn. And I think you mentioned it earlier, I think, learning through seeing something being done. Justin, thanks so much. This has been a really, really both fascinating and enjoyable conversation. If there are people listening that are thinking, well, maybe I'll give this a try, like, and particularly neurodivergent people that might be struggling in certain areas, what kind of advice would you offer?
Just be curious, like chat with it. Say, hey, I don't have the answer to this. Maybe you do. Like, can you think of any interesting, unique ways to approach this problem? Or can you think of any potential solution to XYZ? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Yeah, just have that chat. You're like, if you're just sitting there, just think of it as thinking, like having a thinking partner. Like, imagine yourself looking at the clouds, wondering what if that, and actually putting that into writing. See what comes up. You might come up with some cool ideas, and then if it suggests something, go a little deeper. Like, cool, let's talk more about that. How can I learn that subject? Break this down into 10 easy steps for me. Like, okay, cool. Now teach me step 1. Like, you never know what'll come of it, and don't be afraid to, just brainstorm.
I was just thinking as well about another application in terms of work. Like, I'm thinking about times where I've struggled, not in terms of the doing of the work, but in terms of the social aspect of work. And there's times when you utilize your friends and family for support, but it can feel like you're overburdening them with the challenges, or how to manage situations, or just to kind of share like what is challenging. And I think that as a confidant, in a way, these technologies can be quite helpful in terms of, and either offering some suggestions for how you might approach something, but also just someone or something that hears you. I think writing in a journal or recording a message has a similar effect, externalizing effectively what one is like struggling with at that time. So I feel another application potentially could be that in terms of work challenges.
One thing that I'd like to pass on to your listeners is, say you have a problem with your life. I need to make more money. Who doesn't? Chat with ChatGPT about that. I need to make more money. Here's my skills. Here's where I think I'm lacking. Here's what I don't think I'm good at. Here's the problem. The problem is I want to go into this field and I didn't study it in school, or I didn't get a degree. Here's my issues. Can you think of a solution? Like, complain to it. Like use it as like a complaint device. Like, say I'm having this problem. I hate this about X. I like this about Y. And just spit all this information out there, and it might come up with some good ideas. If it doesn't, then, it doesn't. But it could. It could be like the changing point in your life, and maybe you'll make more money. That's how I see it.
Justin, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. It's been a genuine pleasure chatting with you, and I hope and I believe that what we've spoken about here will be of interest and benefit to some. For those that, which I'm sure there'll be many, want to kind of understand more about what you do and potentially like reach out to you, how can they get in contact?
Yeah, sure. Happily. It's Justin, Justin, at justinborge.com. Justin, B as in boy, O-R, G as in girl, E as in Edward.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Happily.
So that was my conversation with Justin Borge about ChatGPT, AI in general, and how it can be leveraged to support people to do the work that they want to be able to do, and not have this kind of anxiety that they are incapable of doing it, and can feel a sense of momentum and possibility about what they can do when the steps are broken down and there is adequate support. And, I think for neurodivergent individuals, ChatGPT, for instance, can help with structuring ideas and maintaining momentum on long-term projects. Justin spoke about how he tracks projects, how he plans them out through having these different folders and setups on ChatGPT. And it can help to distill some of the ideas that Justin inputs into it. And I don't think this is just a tool for neurodivergent people or people that recognize themselves as neurodivergent. Anyone that feels maybe that the pre-existing tools don't work for them, or their brain is not as organized or organizes things in a way different from the majority, might benefit. Another way of looking at what this technology can be useful for is accessibility. I think organizations can listen to what Justin has offered and identify, okay, maybe we can integrate this type of AI into our courses or into our programs that can support people when they're out of the program, or when they're at home, or while they're at an event or doing a program, but when there's not necessarily the human support always there that's able to offer the same amount of time. And similarly, I feel that policymakers could potentially look at how workplaces, or just workplaces directly, HR departments can look at how this type of technology can be used as a tool to support their employees to do their best work and to feel a sense of support while in work, as opposed to the tool replacing the human. So that's been this episode. I hope there was something in here that was interesting to you, and thank you for listening, watching, and engaging with the project in whichever way you can. I would very much appreciate sharing of these episodes and liking and subscribing and all those things that hopefully expand the reach of Working to Work. Thanks very much again, and I'll speak to you in the next episode.